There is precisely one reactionary belief I hold with pride. It's that pickleball is the harbinger of societal collapse, and we have an obligation to cling to tennis as the supreme racket sport, lest we lose everything we hold dear. That's why I was excited to watch the new Luca Guadagnino film, which strives to not only breathe new life into tennis, but also the erotic thriller, the mid-budget studio picture, and a series of foundational film theory concepts. These have been the go-to talking points online, as anyone who's acclimated to the white noise of sex scene discourse well knows, but I think the beauty of Challengers is not just that apparent return to form and movies are back sensation, but how it revitalizes those concepts with a modern sensibility. Guadagnino, of course, is a filmmaker who's anything but reactionary. His work is largely revolved around younger generations' incompatibility with the archaic moral systems they're brought up in, and his most popular movie weaponizes nostalgia as a tool of malice to romantically gloss over the trauma the main character's unknowingly experiencing. So it only makes logical sense that he would take the stuffiest sport that still has some relevance in the US, dwindling as it may be, and using it as a vehicle for sweaty, threesome, cuckold, sexual reward and punishment. If nothing else, his proclivity for remaking classics is proof enough that he believes the past is not a sacred institution, but rather a series of active dialogues that we should dust off and update and keep in circulation. The swimming pool, Suspiria, unimpeachable texts that against all odds he successfully resurrected and examined through different eyes with his inquisitive camera, creating something entirely new out of the old. And while not a remake in and of itself, Challengers is in such direct conversation with strangers on a train that one can't help but imagine Guadagnino, upon considering the possibility of entering the tennis movie canon, leaping at the notion of taking on Hitchcock as his chosen artistic interlocutor this time around. I think this is far and away his best work, especially after what I found to be a completely impotent previous film, Bones and all. And I think it's the mark of a director at the height of his craft, fostering an environment for his collaborators to also bring their A-game. To be honest, I haven't been all that sold on Zendaya as an actor, but I think Guadagnino is the first director that's properly brought out her greatest strengths, and you can feel the collaborative energy lifting everyone up mutually, resulting in a relentlessly euphoric 2 hours. The movie follows tennis players Tashi Duncan, Art Donaldson, and Patrick Zweig, played by Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor respectively, as a 13-year saga unfurls in nonlinear fashion throughout the course of a single tennis match. And we experience the trials and tribulations of a god-honest throuple trying to make it in a world of extreme exposure and scrutiny, channeling their sexual frustrations and desires back into the game. As Art and Patrick face off, we grow to increasingly understand the wrinkles and kinks in their relationship with each other and with Tashi, just how much the physical intricacies of tennis, and this match specifically, influence it, and how much Tashi herself is pulling the strings, motivating the two with psychosexual carrot and stick to make up for her own physical inability to play tennis, thus finding a new 3D chess means of playing the game. Strangers on a Train is, most famously, responsible for the cinematic shorthand of two opposing sets of feet moving towards each other, polarized but destined to intertwine. This establishes a dramaturgical dyad which is enforced repeatedly throughout the film, and more importantly for our purposes, imbued into the nature of tennis. In one scene, as all-star Guy Haynes faces off against an unimportant opponent on the court, antagonist Bruno's presence dominates his mind, and we understand that the real match is between these two, not whoever's on the other side of the net. This renders tennis one of the most primal and psychologically direct distillations of man versus man that we have accessible to us in the world of image making. In the past 70 years of cinema since, have been mining all the different possibilities of tennis as dramatic shorthand. Be it in using doubles tennis to telegraph alliances in an imminent family rift, or providing a concentrated adversarial environment for the characters to study each other's decision-making and micro-expressions. Challengers, however, head straight for the source, straight out the gate, recreating Strangers on a Train's face in the crowd shot, as the character with all the emotional power in the scene rebelliously keeps their head still among the spectators' heads volleying left and right, keeping up with the match. In doing so, Guadagnino announces the game he's playing and with whom he's sharing the court. And this is where the conceit of Challengers really opens up. It's a simple question. What if 2 were instead, and stay with me here, 3? That's right. Dramaturgical triad. The odd number is incompatible with tennis, which deals in pairs every which way. Hitchcock gets around this by erasing Guy's physical tennis opponent and replacing him mentally with Bruno, preserving that binary relationship. But Challengers calls the bluff. It says, no, there is a person on the other side of the court, and he is an essential part of the dynamic here. Note that Art and Patrick are coated with white and black wardrobe respectively, calling to mind the color dichotomy between good and evil at the heart of classic westerns, and mind, one of the oldest tricks in the book. But as Challengers unfolds and we learn more about the relationship, we see that coding Patrick as the villain is really a misdirect, and everyone's morals are murkier than we're initially led to believe. This is not just a series of esoteric filmmaking devices. The incompatibility of 3 is the backbone of the film's social context as well. Just as it boggles the nature of the one-on-one or 2v2 game, it also defies heteronormative, monogamous society. It's no coincidence that the movie revolves around the only popular sport in which bad etiquette has a material impact on the game's score. Unlike the unwritten rules of baseball, which has long since dropped any gentlemanly affectations, an obscenity can dock you a point in tennis. And through the film's taffy-like stretching and retracting of Puritanism, Guadagnino and screenwriter Justin Kuritzkis have weaponized the sport as a microcosm of the broader societal scrutiny our throuple is directly at odds with, in which any expression of rage or resentment against the status quo of the game is strictly punished, so repression builds and workarounds are formulated. On a practical, mathematical level, the way this works out is that, as only 2 people can be on the court at the same time, or the same team in doubles, so too can only 2 people be in a relationship at the same time. Tashi, who understands the psychology of the sport better than Art or Patrick, spells this out for them in their first encounter, refusing to be with both of them at the same time, and laying the foundation for everything that's to come. This is the same tension that's at the heart of every love triangle, in which power dynamics and favoritism are inevitable. But rather than tracking their demise, which would essentially affirm mononormativity, the movie sees them perform a sort of calculus throughout the match that allows them to retain their unit in a delicate balance. I would feel ostentatious talking about the movie in such lofty terms if the film itself weren't so quick to make these same sociological observations. In fact, I'd say my biggest gripe with the movie is just how explicitly Kuritzkis communicates the idea of tennis as a relationship, as the characters constantly wax poetic about it. To an extent, these relationships are implicit to tennis and need no explaining, especially when the visual language is so committed to blatantly conveying this on a sensory level, emphasizing each sweat-beating pore on Feist and O'Connor's faces. But it still works, because it's clear these characters share a bond over one common interest, one common language, and it just so happens that that language is about tennis and sex. Considering tennis's forced etiquette in terms of Guadagnino versus Hitchcock, one can't help but think of the parallel between these puritanical rules and the Hays Code, which Hitchcock himself rebelled against with such brazen images as the North by Northwest closer. In many ways, it's a fool's errand to try and outdo Hitchcock in terms of sheer, repressed sexual energy. Nearly every motif of his boils down to some sort of sexual punchline. Ropes leading men are oozing sexual tension that the Hollywood system would not legally allow come to fruition, and thus it became even sexier. The irony of Challengers is that the key back-to-tradition talking point people have celebrated is in fact a return to a tradition of more sex, more eroticism. We're living in the least puritanical times in modern history. Just last year, we found explicit sex comedy at the heart of one of the most lauded films of the year, as well as sexual deviancy driving the year's most popular piece of garbage. Because actual societal taboos are dwindling at a rapid rate, there's nothing like the Hays Code to rebel against, and therefore less room for the kind of explosive sexual repression Hitchcock was tapping into. With effectively too much leniency to do whatever they want, filmmakers need to figure out new ways to restrain themselves in order to evoke the same sense of libidinal dam bursting. And adding to a more sexually liberal status quo is the increasingly liberating filmmaking technology that's developed in the past 70 years. In a world where a cop car can leap over a drone flying 60 miles per hour, there are no restrictions placed on the physical capabilities of the camera, even shooting on lush 35mm. And Guadagnino takes full advantage of this mobility with his most hyperactive camera yet. There's a shot where the CGI tennis ball seems to be served through the lens, and looking at the audience at my screening, you would have thought a train was arriving at the station in 1890s Paris, or that Carmen Cortez was reaching through the theater screen in 2003. 2 milestones of equal import. We briefly take on a perspective from under the ground looking up, court lines chalked over our eyes, and at one point we literally embody the POV of the tennis ball. If the film is so visually bombastic all the time, how could there possibly be room for restraint and repression? That's the magic trick of Challengers. For one, the pace is actually deceptively glacial. The film's nonlinear approach is confounding at first and seemingly all over the place. We hop from present day to flashback a week before to way earlier flashback, back to present, back to earlier flashback, and it takes a good 30 minutes for the triple timeline to really click. Once it does though, not only does it retroactively justify that acclimation period, but it's cross-cutting like fucking Dunkirk. It's this insanely high energy, and even though it doesn't have the principled timeline rigidity of Christopher Nolan, even at its most controlled, even attempting to formally mimic the back and forth of a tennis match, it's a little all over the place. You get the sense that we're receiving information at the times most crucial to our understanding of the present, and also at the times that crank up tension at the most intuitive rate. This means a 10-second interaction between Art and Patrick on the court will take minutes, slowed down almost past the point of motion. The slow-mo only becomes more extreme the deeper we get into the film, and by the last 15 minutes or so, we're practically screaming for things to pick up because the anticipation is so agonizing. So as the story refrains from moving any faster than we'd like it to, the ballistic camera itself embodies that force of unexpelled sexual energy driving our characters. The other, possibly more important factor is that there are no actual sex scenes. Characters edge each other, a would-be sex scene is disrupted by Tashi and Patrick fighting, characters describe sexual experiences, and Art and Patrick even develop shorthand within the structure of a tennis serve to communicate a specific sexual act. But the film relies on the world around these characters to externalize the act of sex. And it packs that world to the brim with innuendos, spanning a vast range of registers, from tongue-in-cheek as Art throats Patrick's churro, to epic and grandiose as a windstorm wreaks havoc on Tashi and Patrick, reigniting their impassioned infidelity. So the film as a whole sort of edges the audience in this way, if you will. The central tennis match itself is basically one elongated sex scene, which is where the film becomes the latest entry in a genre I'm calling everything is about sex, except the sex that everything else is about is also about sex. Like the literary psych proverb suggests, everything is about sex, and sex is about power to an extent, especially in Tashi's case, but there's an additional full circle quality where it's also celebrating sex itself. Art struggles with a sort of general impotence regarding every facet of his life. Lethargic in his marriage, sleepwalking on the court, but he's also literally not having sex. So Tashi's psychosexual ploy ends up being partly about rectifying and erecting all these pieces of his life, using sex to fuel the power dynamic of the sport as he metaphorically gets it up, but then the sport swings back around into this extended metaphor about sex. Honestly, it's not even an extended metaphor at that point. Through its many layers of obfuscation and roleplay, the match really becomes a literal sex act. While the movie largely plays like a more conventional heteronormative battle between two men over a woman who's the mutual object of their desire, we're shown quite explicitly the homoerotic backbone between Art and Patrick's relationship. In fact, I don't think it's possible to overstate how deeply this is baked into every prop, every conversational double meaning, the body language in their every interaction. Narratively, this goes all the way down to their most formative sexual experience, learning to masturbate, in which Patrick's antagonism is effectively seared into Art's very conception of sexual gratification. Tashi quite literally "y tu mamá también's" them. Indiana Joneses herself out for each of them to the other. Job and Tony Wonders them. Lady Gaga and the Golden rules them. Really, it's a tale as old as time. But after this first, incredibly direct instance of the old switcheroo, this is the game she continues to play with them on broader, subtler, and more conceptual levels throughout the rest of their career. As they each think they're only after Tashi, a certain other Lonely Island bar permeates throughout their encounters with her. You know what, maybe Andy Samberg actually ghostwrote this entire movie. But in maintaining ostensible heterosexual plausible deniability, closing us out with a fraternal hug rather than laying pipe directly on the court, this sexual anguish remains at once dormant and also released. Art takes back control over his life, his career, his marriage, his image, his relationship with Patrick, and the missing cog in this sexual clockwork. So it embodies friendship and power and jealousy and greed and lust and betrayal and fatigue and family values and mortality, but it also circles back around to sex for sex's sake. Art and Patrick need each other. They need Tashi to bring them together, and she needs them to live vicariously through. It's an odd but perfect harmony that they all seem to recognize at the exact same moment, and I think in that sense, Guadagnino's Gambit proved sound, and this ending, with its undeniable sexual release within the restrictions it sets up for itself, proves worthy of Hitchcock sending his train through a tunnel. Frankly, this is the best new release I've seen in a long time. Like, a significant margin above anything I watched last year. It just makes you feel alive and reinvigorates your sense of worth and determination and invariably your sex drive through purely cinematic language. It makes you want to go back and watch all the movies it's in conversation with, but it also makes you excited for the future of cinema. And above all else, it pumps you with pure adrenaline and makes you want to go out there and hit something with a racket. And no, not a pickleball racket. I'm talking full-bodied, curvaceous tennis. And for that alone, my hat's off to Guadagnino and his team. That's it from me on Challengers. Yeah, great movie. Links in the description. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'm gonna take a minute to plug my Patreon again because I'm doing that again now. There's a lot of bonus content you can find. Literally hours and hours of bonus content, particularly these patron-chosen, Patreon-exclusive reviews I've been doing. For those who didn't watch the last video where I talked about this, I've covered Tampopo, I've covered Gummo, I've covered Wizards, and soon I will be covering Mike Lee's Naked on Patreon. So, really excited about what's going on over there. Figured you guys might be interested in checking it out, and if it just so happens that you are, you know where to find the links. All right, yeah, that's it officially from me. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.